Hey, how's it going, guys? It's me, Rocco, again. I'm just a fucking dude who reviews albums if you're new to the channel. Just, whatever comes to mind, like modern albums, classic albums, usually in the rock, classic rock, hard rock, metal, progressive rock, and prog genres. Those are like basically what I focus on. But I'll review anything. I love a lot of like singer-songwriter, a lot of folk, a lot of jazz, just, whatever interests me. So thanks for joining me on the channel. And today I'm going to be continuing some 2019 reviews. So we're in 2020 now, and it takes me a long time to really like absorb and digest albums. So there's always going to be a bit of delay after an album comes out, and I think that just gives me time to like to kind of like ruminate over the album and kind of absorb it and see how it holds up over time. And I think that's the best way to make reviews, in my opinion. So yeah, so today we're going to be reviewing a fucking awesome album, okay, from 2019, from early 2019. It's called Feral Roots by the modern blues slash hard rock slash soul band slash folk band Rival Sons. And this album here was a fucking big surprise for me because, like lately, like there's been so many great metal albums, so many great progressive rock albums. I mean, these last few years of the 2010s have been just great in that sense. But really for hard rock and just pure rock in general, the only big band that I could think of that was just making waves was Greta Van Fleet. And say what you will about Greta Van Fleet, but I think they are pretty strong songwriters. Their songs do have a lot of great melodic hooks, and they incorporate a lot of blues and obviously a lot of like that Led Zeppelin influence. So Led Zeppelin's my favorite band of all time. So for me, that's not a big deal. And when I want to hear something original and creative, I'm not going to reach into my pile of albums and pick out a Greta Van Fleet album. I'm going to pick out like a Yes or a fucking Opeth album or whatever, something like that, something creative. When I want to just rock out, Greta Van Fleet really hits the spot. So I'm a fan. Anyway, not to go off on a tangent, but Greta Van Fleet were really the only bands, were really like the biggest band producing like classic sounding rock. And but little did I know that this band here, Rival Sons, was under the surface as well. They're a highly critically acclaimed band, but they're not as popular as Greta Van Fleet. And that's not to say they're an underground band. Like they are on kind of like a major label now, and they toured with a lot of bands, as I'll talk about later. But it doesn't seem like they're getting as much traction as Greta Van Fleet. And they've been around like a lot longer, since 2009. And I believe Greta Van Fleet came out in 2014 or so. And yeah, these guys are awesome. I mean, the thing about them that sets them apart from bands like Greta Van Fleet, and that's probably the last time I'm going to mention that band because I've already mentioned their name like 100 times so far. But these guys are actually original. I mean, they take their influences and like you can hear bits and pieces. Okay, yeah, that sounds like there's some Zeppelin-esque moments. There's a lot of blues, a lot of folk in their music, and you could kind of pick out where their influences were. But these guys sound pretty original. I mean, like none of their songs are really blatant ripoffs of other bands. And the lead singer, Jay Buchanan, is fucking phenomenal, and he's really powerful. And a lot of people compare him to Robert Plant, but I don't think he's emulating or trying to impersonate Robert Plant in any way. Kind of like what the lead singer of Greta Van Fleet's pretty much been doing, to be honest. This guy, he just puts a lot of power and emotion into his voice, and in that sense, he's similar to Robert Plant, but a lot of singers did that too. And again, he's coming from a blues, rock kind of band, so obviously there's going to be a similarity there. So I don't think he's plagiarizing Robert Plant, like I've seen a few people saying on the internet. But honestly, one of the most talented singers I've heard in the modern age. I mean, his voice is just fucking phenomenal. And yeah, so I bet you're wondering like what made me want to like discover this album, like what made me get into it. Well, basically, here's the funny thing. I've actually known about Rival Sons before I knew about Greta Van Fleet, okay? But I always had them on the back burner, and to be honest, I forgot about them for a while. And the first time I heard about them was when they released their album Pressure and Time, which was, I think, back when I was in, like, grade 10 or something. It was a long-ass time ago. And my friend, he knew I was a huge Zeppelin fan. He's like, Rocco, you gotta listen to this song, Pressure and Time. It sounds like Zeppelin. And I heard it, and like the drumming definitely had that thunderous feel, and the singing, again, emulated Robert Plant's powerful vocals. But I thought it was great, and I was thinking like, okay, like they're not a copy of Led Zeppelin, they're pretty creative. So I should get into these guys. And a little, ironically enough, I never ended up getting into them. again, back then, those were like my prog years. I was getting into progressive rock, and I must have put them on the back burner and ended up just forgetting about it. So a few years, actually quite a few years went by, and then here comes 2016, and one of my favorite bands of all time, Black Sabbath. Okay, they're going on their final tour, and the end tour, and Rival Sons opened up for them. And I went to see Black Sabbath, and I knew Rival Sons was opening for them, and I'm like, oh yeah, I think I've heard of that band before. And I went back, I listened to Pressure in Time again, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. I heard this song like 5 years ago, and it was great. So I went to see Black Sabbath. It was a fucking phenomenal show. Rival Sons did a great job opening up, but the thing was, it was like early into the concert. It was before Sabbath. We were all fucking hyped to see Sabbath, and I was in a more like metal kind of mood that day. So like I liked the Rival Sons, but I wasn't like basking in their glory. Plus, I was like talking to my friends about Sabbath and kind of like fooling around, and I think I had like a few drinks before, so I wasn't really as focused as I was. And after the concert, I was meaning to check out Rival Sons again, and I went on Wikipedia and I noticed they'd released like quite a few albums in that time, so pretty prolific band. And again, things got in the way and I never got into them. So to make a long story short, here we are. It was late 2019, and I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers, Pete Pardo. Fucking love that guy. Talking about his top albums of 2019. And they came up again. Rival Sons, Feral Roots, which is their sixth studio album released in January 2019, was his number one album on that list. And I take this guy's opinion pretty seriously. He has a really, he seems really knowledgeable about music of all genres. And it was at that moment where I knew I had to stop putting this shit off and listen to this shit. So I teamed up with my good friend. We listened to the album on Facebook one night, a couple of weeks ago now. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. No, it was a bit less. But I was fucking blown away. It was great. The album started off, the first few tracks, I was rocking. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a cool rocking album. But then from the fourth track onward, this album was a fucking masterpiece. I mean, track after track after track was just so fantastic, so well produced, and just a rarity these days. Like, you don't get good classic / hard / blues rock these days. And it just blew me away. And I was getting emotional near the end of the album when the song Imperial Joy came in. It was at that moment where I realized, like, I fucking love this album. And I knew I had to review it because everyone should know this album. This band should be like so much bigger than they are. Definitely they should be as big or even bigger than Greta Van Fleet. I mean, this album here is trumps Greta Van Fleet, hands down. I mean, there's no comparison. Like, this is way better than Greta Van Fleet. And that might be controversial. But yeah, I was just blown away, and I've listened to the album at least like 10 times in the past week, and it hasn't gotten old. Okay, the first few tracks are getting kind of old now. We'll get into that later. But the rest of the album is just rock solid from front to back, and songs are even increasing in stature for me. So yeah, so that's kind of like the background of how I got into the band. Now I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the history behind the band, a little bit about, what they were doing differently on this album, and then we'll get on with like the track by track reviews. All right, guys, so as I kind of alluded to in the intro of this video, Feral Roots is actually the first album, like the first full-length album I've heard by this band. So again, I was kind of hesitant to review it at first, thinking like, oh, maybe I should check out their other albums first. But again, just like my Incauda Venom review by Opeth, I feel like that's kind of unnecessary at this point. Like, if I have something to say about an album, I should just say it and get it off my chest. So I did a lot of research about the band's history. And again, I've known about the band for quite a few years now. And they have a pretty interesting history. And from the interviews I've seen with them, they have a great approach to making music. So basically, Rival Sons, they formed in 2009 in California. With the songwriting team of Jay Buchanan, the lead vocalist, and Scott Holiday, the lead guitar player. And at first when they formed, Jay Buchanan, he was kind of skeptical because, he hadn't been in any rock bands in the past. Like, he'd been in bands. Like, he'd been touring as a solo musician, and Scott Holiday had also been in a few different bands. So these guys were kind of like veterans at this point. And it's kind of strange because I tried to look up how old these guys were. They don't really have like individual Wikipedia pages, so it's kind of hard to figure out. But they look like they're in their like early 30s, I'd say, like mid to late, or even mid 30s. I don't know. I'm horrible with ages. And considering if they formed in 2009, they'd probably been around for a long time before that, at least probably from like the late 90s or mid to late 90s. So So yeah, these guys weren't like amateurs at the time. So I'm assuming like their early albums. Again, I heard Pressure in Time, which is kind of like their the song Pressure in Time, which is the title track from their first like major label record, and it sounds like so polished, so refined. Doesn't sound like an amateur band whatsoever. So you know, these guys when they formed, they already had like kind of a vision. And again, Jay Buchanan, he was kind of skeptical because he was never really in the rock scene, and he kind of made Rival Sons kind of his side project. But once they started making waves and getting a lot of attention, and you know, people started to take notice, hey, this band's just cranking out fucking phenomenal hard rock in the 2010s. Then he made it his full-time career, and thank God he did, because I'm telling you guys, this guy, Jay Buchanan, his voice was made for rock and roll. It's so powerful, it's so passionate, and honestly, the guitar playing is amazing, but what keeps me coming back to this band is those fucking powerful vocals. So basically, they self-released their debut album. So you know, it wasn't on a major label; it was just self-released. So a lot of people don't really consider it their first album. But then they got signed to a record label. You know, that debut album kind of made a little bit of noise. And in 2011, they released their album Pressure in Time, which was very highly acclaimed. All the rock critics, Classic Rock Magazine, they were saying that this was a band to watch. Like, these guys were like the next up-and-coming band. And year after year, they kept getting all these accolades. Honestly, every time they released an album, which was actually quite frequent, I think 2011, 2013, 2014, 2016. So about every year, like I guess a year of touring, a year of writing albums, which is fucking awesome. You know, these days bands, they release an album like whenever they feel like, you know, like Metallica, for example. Like they fucking barely release albums, which kind of pisses me off. But anyway. Sorry, I was getting parched there. But yeah, this album here, it's their sixth album. So again, 6 albums in like a 9-8 year time span these days is considered amazing. And every single album they released, it got so many accolades. Like all the rock critics were praising them and, you know, saying that these guys are like truly a unique and engaging rock band. But you know what? They were still under the surface for many years. And that's the thing. Today, modern music, we all know it's dominated by hip hop, uninspired pop. And it's just shit, to be honest. Like, even from an objective point of view, a lot of the songs that are popular these days, like, for example, you listen to like Cardi B and like a few years back, Nicki Minaj was really popular. And those artists like are objectively crappy. I mean, like you listen to them and it's just all auto-tune and bullshit, right? And it just pains me to say that these artists are popular where Rival Sons are fucking working their ass off, actually creating unique and interesting music. And, you know, getting all this critical acclaim from the rock critics and the music critics, but, you know, never really cracking into the mainstream. And thankfully enough, this album here has I think they're finally getting recognized in the mainstream press, because it did go to #1 on like the rock charts, and it was nominated for 2 Grammy Awards. One for the song Too Bad, Best Rock Performance, and one for the whole album, Best Rock Album. And even last year, Greta Van Fleet won for that category. And just on a side note, it's kind of sad watching the Grammys when they kind of like introduce all these rock awards early on in the show when no one's even there, no one's even in the audience. And it's kind of depressing, to be honest. You know, it kind of makes you think rock is dead. But then when you look at albums like this, you got to totally just change that mindset, because stuff like this is just keeping rock alive. And again, year after year, all their albums were highly acclaimed. I heard they have a great one from 2014, The Great Western Walkery. And that one I really got to check out, because that one got a lot of praise. But yeah, these guys were toiling and working hard. And a lot of bands were fans of these guys. Like a lot of the big classic rock bands. Like, for example, Kiss, Deep Purple, fucking Aerosmith. And for me, my personal favorite, Black Sabbath. And, you know, they were getting a lot of attention from these artists. And throughout the 2000s, they were opening for a lot of these artists. So they opened for Kiss first, then Aerosmith, then Deep fucking Purple, one of the greatest bands of all time. And then finally, they went on a 13-month tour with Black Sabbath, as I already mentioned. And so yeah, a lot of the old artists really love these guys. I don't see Greta Van Fleet opening for any of these like classic artists. So really, that just goes to show how great these guys are. And excuse me, for a band like Black Sabbath to let these guys tour with them, again, like these guys aren't really considered metal at all. Like they do have a lot of heavy riffs, and a lot of riffs on this album that I'll talk about kind of inspired by Sabbath. So I think they, from that tour, they got a little bit of influence from them. But, they're definitely not considered a metal band. So for Black Sabbath to go out of their fucking way to enlist these guys to open for them, that just goes to show how passionate they are about this band. And, they could have gotten like an infinite number of metal bands to open for them, but they chose Rival Sons. So if that doesn't say how great these guys are, really nothing will. And yeah, so that's kind of like the backstory. So now I think they're kind of like breaking in, hopefully. Hopefully they'll be just as big as Greta Van Fleet. And again, I'm sounding negative about that band. And I know I said I wouldn't talk about them, but just for the record, I do love Greta Van Fleet, okay? Let's just get that out of the way. Starting now, I'm going to stop talking about it. So hold my word to that. And yeah, basically, this album here in particular was a pretty creative album for them. They went into, when they were writing the songs, they were off on this like wilderness, not a wilderness retreat, but they were basically out in the woods, taking a break. And they were really inspired by, nature. And Jay Buchanan, he'd actually grown up in a small town in California, which was heavily wooded. So he kind of considers himself to have grown up in the woods. And he always had that connection with nature. And for me, that's just really personal because myself, I've always had a connection with nature. If it was summer right now, I'd definitely be recording this in my backyard with the tomato plants and all the garden growing in the background. It's just, I love that stuff. I in the modern age, I think more people need to take note of nature and really connect with it. And I love camping. I'm an avid camper. And that really speaks to me. So, when they went into the studio, they kind of had that mindset of, they were just in nature and, I can't remember what it was, like a cabin or something. And they wanted to just recreate that kind of sound on the album. And they succeeded perfectly. I mean, this album is just so rootsy, but it does maintain that hard rock, hard blues kind of feel to it. So, kind of a concept album in that sense, but not really a concept album, but definitely it has a vibe to it, has a great vibe to it. And yeah, so that's pretty much the background to the album. Now I want to kind of just talk about a few like miscellaneous things like the album cover and their approach to writing and recording, which is really fucking cool. Alright guys, so I just like to start off by saying, I already mentioned that these guys were pretty prolific in the early 2000s, and that's just really a result of their unique approach to making albums, which is really retro and really awesome, and I wish more bands did this. Basically, what they do is they go into the studio, they record themselves live as a band. So, usually these days they record vocals as separate tracks and guitars as separate tracks and, and then glue it all together, which, can work, but really to get that organic and, authentic feel, you really do need to just record yourself live in the studio. And that's what these guys do. And they say they spend no longer than 1 month in the studio. So they go in, fucking inspiration strikes, they record, and they get the fuck out because they know that if they overwork the music, it's just going to turn out like too polished and too fucking, too generic sounding. So they know that they have to go in and kind of like trap lightning in a bottle. And I saw an interview with these guys talking about, specifically Jay Buchanan and Scott Holiday, talking about like the writing and recording process. And I fucking love it. I love the spirit behind it. And I love how they just throw caution to the wind, go in and out. And I think that's how the best albums in the world were really created. When inspiration strikes, you go into the studio, you record it, and you get your ass out of there. And fuck, it's just an amazing way to record albums. And there's a few great quotes that I've heard from the lead guitar player. So he says that idle hands are the devil's workshop. So that basically means that, if you're in the studio and you record something and you go back to it and you want to do 1 million takes, that's, you're getting into some risky business there, basically getting rid of the initial magic of the song. It's kind of like writing a test. Usually they say when you're writing a multiple choice test, your first gut instinct is usually right, but then afterwards you overthink it and you end up changing your answer and you fuck up. And that's really like, that's really like the musical essence of that kind of analogy, because like really you just gotta, bands, they gotta stop overthinking things. They gotta go into the studio. Obviously, if you're a progressive rock band and you want to have all these grandiose things, it's gonna take a little bit more time. But for a rock band, like that's really what you have to do. So kudos to Rival Sons for really getting that spirit right and really getting it down there. Another thing I want to mention is the album's 46 minutes, perfect length of an album. I always said 40 to 45 minutes is like literally the perfect length for a studio album. When you sit down, you don't want to spend like an hour and a half listening to a fucking album. You want to just spend like 30, I'd say 35 to 45 minutes. Just, that's basically as long as a bus ride or, just winding down after a long day's work. It's the perfect amount of time. Now, me, I'm a big music fan, so I spend like hours of my day listening to music, whether that be like commuting or like, when I come home from work or when, in general. But for the average listener, that's the perfect amount of time. And it really like cuts down the fat, really allows the album to shine and have less filler tracks. And this album here really doesn't have much filler whatsoever. Again, I'm going to mention the first few tracks on the album a couple times throughout this review, but overall, they're not filler, but the rest of the album is just so much better than the first few tracks. Anyway, that's just a side note. But yeah, so these guys really have a great way to approaching making music. And the album cover as well. I fucking love this album cover, guys. It shows this rabid dog kind of running amidst this field of beautiful flowers. And it's just the perfect embodiment of the sound of the album. I mean, you got this ferocious dog representing their hard rock sound, balls to the wall riffs, Black Sabbath inspired riffs. And then you got the beautiful flowers in the background, really reflecting the soul and folk kind of nature of the album. So it's a really great album cover, and it's just artistically very beautiful. So that's pretty much all I have to say about like the background to the album. Now let's talk about like the overall review. So what makes this album special? What makes it stand out? Well, it really boils down to a few different things. First off the bat, I'm going to mention Jay Buchanan's vocals on this one are just ridiculous. Like, his vocals are fantastic. They're so emotive. They're so emotional, and which is the same thing. But they're so powerful. And again, like, people might say he's kind of like emulating Robert Plant, but I really think his voice has, just so much soul and such a distinct tone to it that it doesn't sound like a generic singer at all. Like, it's just so unique. And again, he just puts on a powerhouse performance. I saw an interview where he mentioned that he kind of fucked himself over because it's going to be really tough to kind of like sing these songs day in and day out on a tour. And yeah, I could definitely see him kind of having trouble with that, but he likes to challenge himself. So yeah, Jay Buchanan's fucking phenomenal. The overall sound of the album, it's just an incredible combination of hard rock. So you got a lot of catchy, heavy riffs. Again, reminiscent of Black Sabbath, but the vocals aren't doomy whatsoever. So that's where the comparison ends. Very crunchy, very aggressive sounding riffs. But there's a lot of soul on this album as well. There's a lot of female backup singers singing on the album, a lot of gospel influence on it, and a lot of folk influence as well, a lot of acoustic sections, which gives the album like an awesome balance between hard rock and acoustic, which really appeals to me because, it's one thing to listen to an album that's like 100% hard rock. Like, you listen to an AC/DC album, for example, or a Motorhead album, and it's fucking great. Like, when you're in the mood for it, you just put on Ace of Spades, and you're rocking for like 40 minutes. But the replayability factor is kind of low because you got to be in the mood for that. But this album here really combines all that, like all those aspects, and has like a great like acoustic vibe to it, combined with the classic rock, and it clashes on individual songs as well. It's not like you just have an acoustic song followed by a hard rock song followed by an acoustic song. Like, they really combine that shit perfectly. And it's incredible. And I've heard people say that, they're just kind of ripping off Led Zeppelin 3. And I think that's total bullshit. I mean, just because you're incorporating folk and acoustic influences onto your album doesn't mean you're copying Led Zeppelin 3. Like, are people on fucking drugs? Anyway, that was just basically one review I read, so I'm not going to dwell on that point. But these guys are so original. And again, the riffs definitely have a Sabbath feel to it. If you listen to the riff on Too Bad, that's undeniably a Tony Iommi inspired riff. And I really think that their 13 months with Sabbath really rubbed off on them, which is great because, you know me, I'm a die-hard Sabbath fan. But, the more Sabbath, the better, I always say. Anyway, the soul influence, I already mentioned, it's fantastic with the female backup singers, just giving the album this epic and soulful feel. Great riffs, I already mentioned. Just reading my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. Oh yeah, and no song is over 6 minutes in length. So they really do pack a lot of emotion and a lot of different themes into these songs, which is great because, me myself, I'm coming from a progressive rock kind of. I'm a huge progressive rock fan, and sometimes it's easy to forget that a short 3-4 minute song can be equally satisfying as like a 8 to 10 minute like epic length song. And these guys really hammered that home for me and made me realize like, fuck, I should be listening to some more hard rock these days, because lately I've been listening to a lot of metal and progressive rock, and these guys really shone the light and reminded me how great classic rock is. So yeah, just incredible album. Now, without further ado, let's just get into the track-by-track reviews, where I kind of like break it down by track, get a lot more in detail, and of course, check the table of contents below in the description to skip to certain songs, if you don't want to hear me talking about every single song. So yeah, here we go. Track 1, Do Your Worst. So guys, before I get into the specifics of this track and like the next 2 tracks, I just want to say first off that, as I kind of alluded to earlier on, the first 3 tracks on the album, for me, they're the weakest 3 tracks on the album, and they are very strong, very hard rock, and very punchy songs that are really short, straight to the point, and really get your blood pumping. But I think that over time, these 3 songs are going to have like the least replayability factor, at least for me. But yeah, they do a great job of just getting your heart rate going, starting off the album on a high note, and really getting things moving along. And in interviews, I've even seen members of the band say that they just wanted to get like the short, sweet, radio-friendly songs out of the way right off the bat, because this album really is about like the deep album tracks, as they put it. And I guess, you know, opening the album like this really does grab the listener's attention. And these next 3 songs are really great. So I'm going to be pretty brief about them. But yeah, the first track here, Do Your Worst, it's just a straight up, it's just a banging track. I mean, this one here, it starts off with this distorted, heavy guitar riff, and before you know it, Jay Buchanan comes in with his signature, soulful, and, you know, intense vocal delivery, just like a furious tornado just swirling into the mix. It's just, his vocals are, again, like the highlight of this whole song. And the thing about this track, it has a really anthemic and catchy chorus, and a lot of nice stop and start guitar riffs with Jay Buchanan's vocals, giving it that dramatic effect. And paired with that chorus, it's a really catchy song. It'll be in your head for days. And the big surprise for me was at the end of the song, there was this weird kind of like distorted slide guitar solo. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say. Or what sounds like it. I don't know if it's actually slide guitar, but it sounds like it's a really heavy, distorted slide guitar. And it lasts like about like 20 to 30 seconds. And I wish it lasts longer. It's a really cool, for me, the coolest part of the song. But yeah, track 1, Do Your Worst. It's a really nice, punchy, hard rockin' intro. Just shows the band definitely means business. And this is one of the tracks that puts the feral in feral roots. So yeah, good track. I'm going to give it probably an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. So a very above average track, but not a masterpiece. So moving on to number 2. Track 2, Sugar on the Bone. And this one here, guys, this is just a groovin', crunchy, heavy tune. Again, just like the first track, it really packs a punch, and it's a short 2 to 3 minute just sampling of hard rock excellence. And this one here, I definitely think it's a little bit of an improvement over the first track. It's a little bit more ferocious, a little heavier. The chorus is really catchy, and they do a lot of interesting things on this one. So, like the first track, it opens up with a pretty heavy, simplistic, and distorted guitar riff. And Jay Buchanan, again, comes in swirling like a hurricane. Fantastic vocals, as always. And again, a very catchy chorus. Very anthemic. I mean, it's almost impossible for this shit not to get stuck in your head. But what I really like about this track is the frickin' percussion. I mean, I think I already mentioned the fact that the drummer on this album kind of sounds like John Bonham, you know, with the heavy-handed, thunderous percussion. But he also uses a lot of cowbell in the song. So throughout the whole song, you get that heavy drumming plus the cowbell, giving it this groovy, kind of quirky feel. And kind of reminds me of the song Good Times, Bad Times by Zeppelin. You know, not that it's like an exact replica of it. Far from it. But with that heavy drumming paired with the cowbell. That's just a match made in heaven, just straight from John Bonham. And yeah, fucking awesome percussion on the song. Also, there's some nice organ in the background throughout the entire song. So although you're getting these constant heavy riffs throughout the entire tune, I love that organ, giving it that good old-fashioned soulful vibe, which is really cool. And like, it's easy to miss the first few times, but then afterwards you start realizing, oh yeah, there's fucking organ back there. So really cool. And again, there's this awesome guitar solo later in the song, but just like in the first track, it's a bit of a tease. It only lasts about like 20 to 30 seconds. So this could have easily been like a 4-minute track if they kind of expanded that section. But I think that's just the inner prog fan of me trying to, get more than get my money's worth, I guess. But anyway, fantastic, heavy tune. I definitely give this one an 8.5 out of 10. It's really cool. But again, not a masterpiece. But we're getting to that. Track 3, Back in the Woods. This is the third and final track of the short, punchy, in-your-face rock tunes. And for me, this one here, I'd say of the first 3 tracks, it's probably my least favorite. And I can see how that would be kind of controversial, because it is probably the heaviest of the first 3, and it's probably the most intense. But for me, I think the chorus of the song is like just slightly lacking compared to the first 2. And really at this point, like you had your fair share of just straight up hard rock. And at this point, I was thinking, like, okay, this album's great, but, like, if all the songs are going to be like this, it's not really going to have a lot of replay value. So, thankfully, I was wrong, and the rest of the album just takes, like, a totally different turn. But, yeah, on its own, Back in the Woods is another great song. I mean, what can you say about it? It opens with this freaking incredible, just eccentric drum solo, kind of evoking the feel of Stargazer by Rainbow. But, not as good as that drum intro, but it's pretty good. It's not bad. Again, you got the heavy riffs, you got a guitar solo that's almost metal at this point, and a lot of stop and start vocals. So, again, we heard a lot of that on the first track, Do Your Worst. So at this point, I'm kind of thinking, like, okay, they're kind of rehashing some of those elements from, like, the first 2 songs already. So, yeah, it's a pretty decent track. But, yeah, on its own, it's excellent. It's a great hard rock tune. Just the chorus is a little lacking for me. Just back in the woods again, back in the woods again. Now back in the. It's okay. It's not bad. But yeah, anyway, Back in the Woods. I give it an 8. At the lowest, a 7.5. At the highest, an 8. So yeah, good track. Very above average.
On your very own children, on your television, in your own reflection, you deny the protection.
Alright guys, so now we're on track 4, about 10-11 minutes into the album, so we still have about 35 minutes of runtime left. And let me tell you guys, from here on out, this album is fucking phenomenal. I mean, from here on in, this is where the album really takes off. And, honestly, every single song from here on out, so 8 or 9 songs, they're all fucking phenomenal. And kicking off this streak of fantastic songs is Look Away. And this one here just instantly grabbed my attention. It opens up with this awesome acoustic section, this folky, Middle Eastern sounding acoustic section with some bongos or tablas in the background. Not too sure what the percussion instrument is. And it's just really cool, really atmospheric. Gives it that, not rootsy feel. Like this isn't like an Americana album, but really that connection with nature, especially with that folk Middle Eastern inspired influence. And I've read on so many reviews of this album that I think it was just one that overtly said that they were ripping off Led Zeppelin 3, but a lot of other reviews did mention that this song has a Zeppelin 3 influence. And honestly, like, I think that that's just kind of crossing the line, because it's just a folk-inspired song. That doesn't mean they're necessarily copying Led Zeppelin 3, just because Led Zeppelin 3 is another band, another album released by a hard rock band that draws on folk influences. So I think that's just a lazy kind of point right there. But anyway, I digress. The best part is this goes on for about a minute and a half. So like they really let it expand and they really let it take its time. It's not just a short 20-second acoustic intro. Like no, they really build up the atmosphere. And then when the song really does start picking up the pace, it opens with this anthemic riff, the down 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 do 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 down 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 down. It's like the perfect resolve to that mysterious folky acoustic intro. And before you know it, it gets right back into the heaviness. I mean, this fucking crunchy riff comes in, and Jay Buchanan is just singing with all his might and all his power. And now, see, this is what makes this song stand out. The previous 3 songs, they were just straight up rockers. But this one here really does draw on so many different influences and perfectly incorporates a heavy hard rock influence with the folk and everything. So this is really the embodiment of what Feral Roots was trying to do as an album. And from here on out, it just continues with that quality. And yeah, it's just an awesome song. Another really catchy chorus. And I just love how it keeps transitioning between that anthemic riff and the heavy chugging section. The again, very Bonham-like drumming. And fuck it, it's an exciting song, guys. I haven't heard a song of this quality from a hard rock band in a long ass time. And you know, I was already into the album, but when this song hit me, I was strapped in for the ride. I mean, this one is a powerhouse. It's a masterpiece. It's a 9.5 out of 10, hands down. And one of my favorite songs on the album, but a lot of them are like neck and neck with this one. So yeah, that's Look Away. A definite classic. Now we're on track 5, the title track of the album, and the longest, clocking in at 6 minutes, Feral Roots. Another phenomenal song, guys. Starts off all folksy and, you know, mellow, but then once the singing kicks in, Jay Buchanan has this yearning and this haunting kind of tone to his voice that just fills the whole song and just permeates the whole song with this yearning and haunting feel. I don't know any other way to describe it. And I freaking love the lyrics of the song, too. Again, it's about his connection with nature and how, you know, mankind really comes from nature. And although that everything we see and, you know, everything we see in the city was man-made, we did come from nature. So we are going to have that, like, internal connection with the great outdoors and, you know, Mother Earth, basically. That's basically his interpretation from an interview. And that yearning to spend time in nature really comes across well on this song. And so lyrically, I love it. Even like it even harkens back to like the loss of innocence. Like there's this one line I really like where he says, "Your body may grow old, but in your mind, you must remain a kid." So that's a pretty strong thought right there, which I kind of agree with. Like you should always maintain that youthful vibe. And although your body gets old and your life circumstances change, you should always have that primal instinct. So I guess that connects with nature as well. The primal instinct of being a kid and that connection with nature. I don't know. That's just my interpretation of it. But yeah, musically, this song's fucking awesome, guys. The chorus, again, like every song on this album, is just extremely memorable. And it's amazing how like people could still come up with choruses these days. You would think like, you know, they've all been taken. Like a lot of the choruses you hear are really generic and boring. But these ones here are just really interesting and uplifting. I mean, this one here is just really powerful, really uplifting. And the guitar playing right before the chorus is really haunting. It really has that kind of like that contemplative vibe to it, which is really cool. And there's also some psychedelia in the song as well. There's like this cool slide guitar interlude, which then builds up into this pretty intense solo, which is awesome. And yeah, like again, the vocals I mentioned are really soulful. He isn't really belting it out during the verses like on the other songs, but yeah, you could tell like Jay Buchanan, like this song kind of makes you believe that he didn't start off as a rock singer. Because on all the songs we heard so far, you could tell like, damn, this guy was born to be a rock singer. But on this one here, you could tell when he's singing in his soulful tone during the verses, you could tell like, okay, maybe he wasn't always a rock and roll singer, but But yeah, really cool. Honestly, what would I give this song? I'm thinking like at least a 9, maybe a 9.5. I think I like Look Away just slightly better than this song, but atmospherically, this song's a little bit stronger. I might give it a 9 out of 10. That's what I'm feeling. So yeah, one of the stronger tracks on the album, and yeah. All right, guys. So track number 6, Too Bad, is by far one of the best songs on the album. And it's honestly, guys, it's fucking songs like this that make me want to do album reviews. Like, these are the songs that ignite my passion for music because they just come out of nowhere and they just blow you away. And honestly, the first time I heard this song, I literally had goosebumps on my arms and my fucking back. I mean, this song is just so powerful, so epic. And yeah, it's just honestly, I don't know what to say about it. Honestly, it was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Rock Performance. I hope to God it wins because this song is just freaking blows my mind every single time. What do I love about this track? Well, let's start off with the riff. The main riff of this song is just, in the intro, I was talking about how they went on tour with Black Sabbath for 13 months, and I definitely feel like the riffing of Tony Iommi definitely inspired the main riff of this track. I mean, it's so heavy. It's like a slow, doomy kind of riff, like like this feels like a bluesier version of a Black Sabbath riff. And right off the bat, that really appeals to me, and it's just an incredible riff. And then all of a sudden, Jay Buchanan comes in with his vocals. They're extremely bluesy at first. But then all of a sudden, when the fucking chorus comes in, and this has to be one of the best choruses I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it's just so powerful. And you have like the female backup vocals in the background, just singing their asses off, just really giving it that soulful vibe and that power. And oh man, there's nothing like it. I mean, it really makes the goosebumps on the back of your neck stand up. And it's fucking amazing. Like, feeling like I hypnotize you, feeling like I deep inside you. Down, 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 down. I'm sorry for my horrible singing, but I couldn't resist singing it. It's just so awesome. And it just totally blows me away. Honestly, there's even a solo at the end of the song. It's just so eccentric, and you could tell like the guitarist Scott Holiday was just giving it his all and just really pouring his passion into it. And at the end of the day, that's what this song's all about. It's all about passion and power. There's so many amazing screams by Jay Buchanan. Even the end of the song, he just screams, "Too bad!" And it just hits you right in the fucking face. And honestly, at this point, when I was listening to this album for the first time, I couldn't believe, like this song is just so much better than the first 3 tracks of this album. I couldn't believe they were on the same album. Like, the first 3 tracks, although they're good, they sound like amateur hour compared to this shit. Like, this song's a fucking masterpiece. I might have to give it a 10 out of 10, guys. It's been blowing me away consistently this whole week. I've been listening to it like nonstop. So yeah, Too Bad. At the worst, it's a 9.5. At the best, it's a 10. So somewhere in that range. It's an all-time classic. I hope it gets the Grammy. And definitely a contender for best song on the album, along with Look Away and 2 other tracks that are coming up on the album. Or, sorry, 1 other track. So without further ado, let's get on to the next song. Alright guys, so now we're on track 7. Stood By Me. Guys, this fucking song here, just like the song that came before it, Too Bad, it's a strong contender for one of the best songs on the album. It's just so fucking powerful, and it's so soulful. It has the female backup singers really giving it that extra oomph in the background, and it's incredible. And what really makes this song stand out for me is this hypnotic guitar riff that kind of like permeates throughout the whole song. I don't know if I can sing it, but it goes kind of like the... Oh no, that was horrible. But basically it's that kind of like descending rhythm that gives the song that kind of mysterious and epic vibe. And gives it that kind of like, for me, a kind of like a southern rock feel. I don't know if that's just me, but that's kind of what I get from it. And again, the lyrics and like the vocals are just fucking phenomenal. Um, Honestly, there's not much to say about it. It's just a straight, it's a powerhouse song, but it does have that hypnotic guitar riff that really sets it apart from the first three tracks. And again, it has the soulful vocals. So this isn't just like a straight up rock song. It has a lot of blues elements, a lot of soul elements, and just one of the best lyrical moments of the album, one of the best vocal moments. And at the end, it just gets so powerful, and it's just so easy to just fall into this song spell and just get enveloped by it and just get lost in this song. Although it's only about 4 minutes long, it's a phenomenal song. This one's easily like a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10. It's just fucking amazing, continuing the streak of greatness. And in my opinion, it only gets better from here. The next song is another, we'll get into it, but it's one of the best songs on the album as well. So yeah, Stood By Me, it's a 9 or a 9.5 in that kind of range.
The blood running in my veins come from the kissing of 200,000 years.
Track number 8, Imperial Joy. Okay, right off the bat, that's a pretty cool song title. But just in general, this song, for me, is one of the best songs on the album. It's just, oh my god, guys. When I was talking about Too Bad, how it, made like the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, the exact same thing happened on Imperial Joy. I mean, this song is just so emotional, so, oh my god, so majestic, so triumphant. And just, it's so soulful. Like, this is the song on the album that I would point to that had the most soul influence on the album. Again, like the female backup singers, their vocals are cranked up to 11, and they really have a chance to shine and really uplift the choruses of the song. And again, Jay Buchanan's powerful vocals just combined with those backup singers are what really makes this song as special as it is. And it's pretty deceptive because it starts off pretty simplistic, a pretty simple riff, a pretty simple verse, but then all of a sudden it just gets so epic and so just over the top that with those backup singers and like the passionate chorus, and you just get enveloped in it, you just get sucked in. And yeah, definitely one of the best songs on the album, probably in the top 3, right up there with what's the name? Look Away and Too Bad. So Too Bad, Look Away, and this track are probably my top 3 on the album. Again, this song here, even the band commented that they were really trying to create something majestic, something really triumphant. And I definitely think they succeeded with this track. Just the way it builds up to such climactic heights. One of the best tracks on the album. I'd give this, honestly, like a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10. I know so far for this review, I've been giving a lot of ranges, like, 9.5 to 10. But really, like, I think a range is more accurate because, like, I'm pretty new to the album. And some days I feel like it's a 10. Some days I feel like it's a 9.5. But more or less in that ballpark. So yeah, Imperial Joy. It's one of the later tracks on the album, but don't sleep on it because it's definitely one of the best.
There's a feeling when I see you that is magic, and I believe it.
Okay, guys, so the next track on the album, it's called All Directions, and this is pretty much the ballad of the album, but it's not your standard ballad. It's not just like a sappy love song or anything like that. This song really has a lot of tricks up its sleeve. And to be honest, when it starts off, it's pretty much a straight-up ballad. It's pretty peaceful, pretty relaxing. The vocals are just, pretty emotive and fantastic. But what really makes this song awesome is that later in the song, about at the 2.5 minute mark, I think, this epic groovy riff just comes bursting in. And this fucking awesome, again, the female backup singers. I mean, honestly, these female backup singers are pretty much like the fucking, not the highlight of the album, but like they give the album so much more life to it, so much more soul to it. And this song's no exception. When those female backup singers come in and they start singing over that groovy riff and the song just builds and builds and builds, it's just freaking amazing. And even when I was listening to this song for the first time with my friend over Facebook, he was even saying, you know what, I'm not feeling this song too much. Like, it's a little, it's a little ballady, it's a little, boring. But then when that build up kicked in, he's like, damn, Rocco, I changed my mind, man. This song's pretty unique. It's pretty awesome. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a really good ballad. It's like basically a textbook ballad in the first 2 minutes, but then after it really kicks into high gear and really builds up, and it doesn't really build up to anything per se. Like there's no like amazing solo at the end of the song, but it just keeps rising and rising and rising. And again, those vocals in the background just give it that oomph that it really needs. And then it kind of just ends, which is not a shame. I was gonna say it's kind of a shame that it just ends without like a solo or anything, but it doesn't need one. Like really, that build up is really like the meat and potatoes of the song, and it's a really cool track. So yeah, all directions, I'll give at least an 8.5 out of 10, maybe even a 9. It's a really great ballad, and really keeps the album moving forward with great momentum.
This is the end of forever. This is the
Okay, guys, so the next track on the album, it's called The End of Forever. And this is a pretty cool track as well. It took me a few listens to really remember this song or really make it have a lasting impression on me. But it's definitely a very good song. Again, very catchy chorus. And what really makes this song stand out is just how it alternates between light and shade. You've got some really heavy, some really groovy sections, alternating with some like nice, laid-back, atmospheric sections. And an awesome slide guitar solo, extremely bluesy. I don't know if I've talked about like the blues influence on this album yet, but along with the soul and along with the hard rock, there is a lot of blues on this album, which is like evident with the slide guitar and even with a lot of like the stop and start kind of vocals, which was a main characteristic of blues music. This song's no exception. And again, with that slide guitar solo, it really shows that they were heavily influenced by the blues. And it's a really good song, too. It has a really groovy riff, really catchy chorus. And you know what? Out of all the songs on this album, after the first 3 tracks, to be honest, it's probably my least favorite. But it's still awesome. And it's always an enjoyable listen. I like how it starts off with this kind of like electronica kind of beat. It's really the only shred of 2019 on this album. Or else you would think this album was recorded in like the fucking 70s or like early 70s, but again with like that 2019's production value and yeah. So I'm not saying it sounds dated, but it really does take on a lot of those like 70s influences, especially on this song here. But yeah, you do get a little bit of that 2019 spice with the electronica intro. So yeah, pretty cool. And again, a lot of like the riff itself is also pretty grungy as well. So I don't know if they took influence from the grunge genre, but I could definitely see this riff being kind of like a grungy 90s kind of riff, if that makes any sense. But yeah, really cool song, and the second last on the album. So without further ado, let's wrap it up with the last song. This one here, I'd probably give an 8 out of 10. It's a really solid track.
My dancing is better than your marching will ever be. We move through the world like shooting stars across the sky.
Alright guys, so last but definitely not least, we got the closing track, Shooting Stars, track number 11. This song here is pretty special, guys. I mean, unlike the other songs, this is a pure soul and blues song. I mean, there's barely any hard rock elements on the song, and it just makes for a really fitting and climactic closing track on the album. I mean, the passion on this song is second to none. The backup singers are like turned up to 11 again, like a lot of the other songs on this second 2/3 of the album. And it's almost gospel. It's like it's soul to the point of being gospel, and it really has a lot of climactic moments where the singers are just going full force, and just the passion, you could really feel it coming across. The authenticity is just incredible, especially when like the chorus of the song comes in where we move through the world like shooting stars across the sky. It just really makes you think, and really, this feels like a song that you would listen to at like 3 a.m. and really like think about your life and think about like the world and what's going on around you. It's just a really soulful and contemplative kind of song. And there is a lot of blues elements on the song as well. There's a very bluesy kind of slide guitar solo, like a lot of the other tracks on the album. And yeah, the sing along chorus just makes it a great anthemic closing to the album. Uh, don't know what else to say about it. It's incredible. This whole, again, since the first 3 songs ended, the album's been so fucking consistently strong that I would honestly say this is like a hard rock slash blues slash soul masterpiece. I mean, it's just fucking phenomenal. And when you go back to it over time, like it's only been like a week or two since I've first listened to this album, and it's been growing on me every single freaking time. So, in conclusion, guys, that pretty much concludes the review. Feral Roots by the Rival Sons. It gives me a lot of hope for the future. It makes me really think that music has a lot more to offer. And, I got to be less cynical about the new music coming out these days. Because although, like, all the Billboard charts are dominated by, like, pop and hip-hop and, like, just disgusting lyrics, uninspired music, there are so many hidden gems out there. And it just warms my heart that, like, stuff like this, and even Greta Van Fleet's album last year, are being nominated for Grammys. And it really shows that, like, the music industry, they might be warming up to, like, this kind of shit, but it's still kind of early to tell, but, it's headed in the right direction. So yeah, guys, Feral Roots. I definitely got to go back and listen to the other albums by the Rival Sons, because, again, I've only heard the song Pressure in Time in this album. But I think these guys have a lot to offer, and I think they're going to make it really big if these, like, recent Grammy nominations are any indication. So when the Grammys happen, we'll talk about it in the comments below, whether they won or not. Hopefully they do. But I'm praying they do, because they really deserve it. And I really hope that the 2020s are just as strong as these last few years of the 2010s, because, again, 2017, 2018, 2019 have been great years for music. And just the creativity has been really amazing. So Feral Roots is a great example of that. And it's just a phenomenal album. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Definitely check it out, guys. Definitely check out this band. They're fucking fantastic. Hopefully they won't be opening up for bands. Hopefully they'll be headlining their own tours pretty soon, because they definitely deserve it. And hopefully they come to Toronto soon so I can see them. And yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say. So thanks for watching, guys. I always appreciate it. I'll leave your comments below, your thoughts on the album. Any other albums you want me to check out, let me know, and I'll do my best to get those requests in. And take it easy, guys. Have a good day, whatever you guys are doing, and rock on. Probably give an 8 out of 10. It's a really solid track.